Hi everybody, FIDE Master Dennis Monokroussos here, and we're going to take a look at a very old game today, played back in 1953 in the Great Candidates event held mainly in Zurich. And the reason for this is that while, like many of you, I suspect, I've had Bronstein's great book on that tournament for many, many years. I've had it since I was a kid. I recently came across another book on this. In fact, there were at least 4 written by participants. So, Bronstein's book, won by Max Erva, the former world champion, who played very well in the first half of that event, but then kind of ran out of gas in the second half and finished, I think, in next to last. Gideon Stallberg, the Swedish Grandmaster, who I think did finish last. And also, last but not least, Miguel Najdorf, who finished, I think with a +1 or an even score. So he did pretty well, maybe even +2, but I think it was +1. Anyway, he was definitely among the, he had a good shot for quite a while to do very well. So, he wasn't able to stay with the leaders at the end, but still he played a very creditable tournament and wrote a very fine book in Spanish, I believe, but was never translated, or at least wasn't translated for a long time. So very recently it was translated. Oh, just checked. Yeah, Najdorf finished with a +1 score with 14.5 out of 28. It was a monster tournament. 15 players, double round robin. Smyslov won with 18 points out of 28. Anyway, as I said, Najdorf's book was recently translated and just came out, or it's about to come out, with Russell Enterprises, and it's a really, really good book. In fact, it might even be better than Bronstein's book, which is widely commended as one of the best chess books of all time. Certainly one of the best tournament books of all time. So, I was looking through some of the games that are really famous in there, comparing the notes of the two grandmasters, and I like Najdorf's book. I think he did a really good job. I think generally he annotates more deeply. Though the game we're going to look at now is a little bit of an exception, and for a couple of reasons. So one is that this was just such an important game that it attracted a lot of attention. Also, the version of Bronstein's book that we have is not the first edition, but a second edition, and Bronstein had the benefit of looking at Najdorf's book in the process of revising his. So there are quite a few places where he uses Najdorf as a jumping off point. And I have to say, though, that the number of variations that he uses that are from Najdorf kind of suggest even there, too, that Najdorf had done a more conscientious job the first time around than Bronstein had. So I really recommend this book. I mean, it's a great event. And if you don't have the Bronstein book, I mean, you should probably get both. But this Najdorf book is really nice, so I highly recommend it. Well, anyway, let's take a look. So the game in question was played between Paul Keres and Samuel Reshevsky, who ended up finishing tied for second, along with Bronstein, 2 points behind Smyslov. At this point, in round 11, Reshevsky was actually leading the tournament. He was half a point ahead of Smyslov, if I recall correctly. Let me see if that was... he was half a point ahead of him at the end of the round. Let me see if he was a half point ahead before the round as well. So I should check on that. Yeah, he was half a point ahead at that point. But Smyslov had his bye. So, the real standings weren't entirely clear, but still kind of the early middle of the tournament. Reshevsky was playing very well. He was undefeated up to this point. Keres had a little bit of a slow start, so he was catching up to the leaders, but really only in the second half did he make a tremendous push and come very close to overhauling Smyslov for first. Anyway, Keres had white and began with d4. So we have a Nimzo-Indian and the Rubinstein variation. And now Keres turns it into a Samish, all right, with a3. So takes. And here, the right move, or certainly the most solid move, the most stable way to play, is with knight to c6. And the point of this is that it forces white to play knight e2 first before he plays e4, as this pawn sack with e4, actually it may not be so bad, but it's not clear that it's ideal. So it may be playable, though. The results have been encouraging, but it hasn't really been tested all that much. So generally knight to e2 is played, and then b6, okay, e4, then knight to e8 to avoid the pin with bishop to g5, castles, bishop a6. And the other point of knight e8 is to meet f4 with f5. And there's plenty of theory on this. In general, though, it seems that black is doing pretty well. So there's a famous Yusupov-Karpov game, which is really a model of how black should handle this whole variation. Alright, so Reshevsky played b6, which is at the very least provocative. Alright, so white gets to play e4 for free, no pawn sack required. Again, knight to e8 would be the more solid way to play, but Reshevsky continued provocatively with bishop to b7. And now the complications really start in earnest. Here you might even want to spend some time. So if you turn this into an exercise, it could take you quite a long time, but it's a really good exercise. I mean, this is just a tremendously rich position tactically, and I think you can have a lot of fun with this. So I'm going to kind of take it in that way, and give you guys the chance to make this into a really good training exercise. So first of all, white to move here, come up with some candidate moves and pick one. All right. Well, I'm going to look at two moves here. So one of them is e5, and then the other is bishop to g5, which was Keres' choice. So e5 is extremely dangerous for black. So let's say he plays bishop takes g2, bishop g5. This is the big idea. Not to take, because queen f6 and black is okay. But bishop g5. Okay, and here, white has at least a couple of moves that are worth considering as well. So you might want to try to analyze those as deeply as you can. Well, both captures on f6 are playable. Let's start with e takes f6. Alright, now black should play probably g6. Preventing fg, preventing bishop h7. Okay, well here too, white's got at least a couple of tries. Probably the best move is queen at g4. Probably. The idea, of course, is to play queen h4 and queen h6 and give mate on g7. Alright, we'll come back to this in a bit, but what do you do about a move recommended at the time by a player named Ashurov, whose analysis is cited by Bronstein? So bishop g6, hg6, and now queen at g4. So what does black do about the threat of queen h4, h6, g7? Well, there's only one defense, it seems, or at least one fully adequate defense, and that's knight a6, and then knight c7. So now if queen h6, of course, the knight can just go to e8. I mean, that's the obvious point here, and black is holding everything and winning. Okay, well, what else can we try? What's another idea for white? Well, rook to d1. This looks quite dangerous as well for black, to play rook d3 and rook h3. How does black defend against this one? Surprisingly enough, he's got it covered. Knight e8, rook d3, and now just bishop to g2. Okay, well, rook to g3. We're going to take this bishop and then come back for seconds. So how does black defend at this point? The solution is knight to d6, threatening knight f5, and on rook g2, c takes d4, and black is going to activate his heavy pieces now, queen c7 after c takes d4, for instance. Rook to g3 is met by knight f5, and it looks like black is winning here. So perhaps the best try is bishop h6, with the idea of bishop g7, and then queen h8 mate. So knight e8 is forced, takes, and now black could play knight f6, but I think simpler and more human, both psychologically and otherwise, is queen takes f6. And this forces the queens off, and now black is simply up a pawn and has excellent winning chances. So this bishop takes g6 idea is very dangerous for black, but it looks like he can survive. So queen g4, and the solution to this one again is knight a6, c7, e8. The difference here, though, is that white hasn't sacrificed his bishop, and he can play on points. He doesn't have to just give mate. So f3 takes, king f2 takes, knight e2, and in this position, black has a rook and 3 pawns for 2 bishops. This king is still a bit vulnerable, though, and I would say that white has good compensation for the material. How exactly to evaluate this position is something you can perhaps pursue on your own. Alright, well, all of that was about e takes f6. There's also bishop takes f6. But here it seems that there's well, it looks like this is just going to lead to a draw. So G takes F6, and now there seems to be nothing more than this kind of perpetual check. So if black tries to avoid it, we'll force him to take sooner or later, or repeat, and this is a draw. So Kara's rightly played bishop to G5. This is the better move. H6, and now what? Well, if bishop H4, G5. So Kara's plays H4, and this leads to all kinds of excitement. Well, the obvious question here: can black take the bishop? So try to work that one out for yourself. Can this bishop be gobbled up? The answer, I think, is that it can, although white will maybe have some small edge. So Hg5, Hg5, so we start with that. Of course, now, knight takes e4 is a blunder. Queen h5, and after f5, g6 cuts off the exit. Very important technique, and it's mate in probably 3 moves or so. So queen h4, rook h4, and then mate. Okay, so g6 is forced, and now white can try a couple of things here. So he can play g takes f6, obviously, and this is maybe his best. And then knight f3, material is even, and white is slightly more comfortable, so maybe a very small edge for white here. But it's very tempting to play queen f3. So knight h5, g4, queen g5, g takes h5. And it looks dangerous for black, but f5 is a good move here. hg, queen g6, queen h3, and now, okay, there's no real threat yet. Queen h8, king f7, rook h7, king e8 is not a big deal. But white is ready to play knight to f3, opening the g file and bringing the knight to e5. That is a big deal. So black must play f takes e4. And now white's move, what should he do at this point? The answer, and I hope you found it, is to play knight f3 anyway. Fantastic move. The point is that most of the captures here, or maybe all of the captures here, are just terrible. All right, let's start with the worst. Let's start with the absolute worst capture. Okay, e takes f3 is obviously completely senseless. Just bishop takes g6. All right, that one's easy. If rook takes f3, well, queen h8 check, king f7, rook h7 wins the queen and should win the game. And if e takes d3, well, in this case, queen h8 check, king here, and now knight e5 check, although I should be careful about this. I think I'm right. King here, takes, check, let's say king g7, and then rook to g1, and white's up the exchange for a pawn, probably winning this, or certainly very close. Okay, so black is forced to play only one thing here, and that's queen f5. So this gets the queen out of the fork on e5. If the knight moves, there's queen takes f2. And in fact, white's best is to come back to g2, strangely enough, and then knight to g5, and then take on e4. All right, at this point, I think queen to g7 check is a threat. Well, actually, I'm not sure. Rook f7, and queen f7, queen f7, of course. So maybe queen g7 is not a threat yet. So c takes d4 can be played, cd, and now king d8 getting out of the way, and it seems that black is equalizing here. All right, very complicated, but it looks like black can take, and then again the key position being after hg, g6 to probably play g takes f6 and knight f3 with a very small edge. Well, Reshevsky played d6, and now Keres goes forward with e5. So another bold move here. D takes e5, D takes e4, and now what should black to move to? So now the burden is on black. How should he defend in this position? Well, lots of moves to consider. Let's start with a couple that aren't very good. Bishop takes g2. So this is just asking a bit too much. Bishop takes f6, g takes, queen g4 check, king h8, queen g2, queen d3, and now it seems like black is okay at first, because if queen a8, then black has queen takes c3 and queen a1. But rook h3 foils black, the queen is under attack, c3 is protected, with an X-ray from the rook on h3, and there's no place for the queen to move to save the rook on a8 and save herself. Of course, you can go to e4 or f3. That would save the rook for the moment, but lose the queen. So white's winning here. Okay, another move that's not very good is the Polygievsky style queen to c7, although the point's not to play queen e5 check and win the bishop, but to play bishop g2 and trap the rook. So it's pretty clever, but after queen to g4, black is busted. Queen e5 check, knight e2, take the rook, and now f4 drives the queen away, and then bishop takes h6 is going to kill black. All right, now let's look at a better move. H takes g5. Okay, so on this, white could try e takes f6, but it looks like g4, this is more accurate than queen f6. This is bad because, do you see why? Check. And if king h7, hg5 wins the queen, and this is also winning for white. So g4, keeping the h-file closed. F takes, rook e8, and black is slightly better here. So this e takes f6 is a mistake. So the right move is hg5. Okay. Black needs to play bishop b4. Again, if knight e4, queen h5 will force mate, f5, g6, and so on. So bishop b4, and now white to move. Again, you've got choices. What do you do? What's the best choice? All right. The answer, and I'm sure more analysis could be added to this, but the right answer is rook h3. Very easy move to miss. So, on the obvious g takes f6, black plays queen d3, and white really has nothing better here than just trading queens. And he's got enough compensation here just about. Maybe bishop f5 gives white some, well, it gives black some tiny edge, but probably it's equal to. So something like this, rook h4, threatening to double rooks on the h-file, and that forces black to give back the piece. And then something like this is equal. Black's a pawn up, but with the rook on the 7th, white has full compensation and is bound to regain the material at his leisure. Okay, so after bishop to e4, instead of g takes f6, white should play rook h3. The point being that on bishop takes d3, rook takes d3. Or so you might think. In fact, the point is to prevent queen takes d3. So white doesn't mind this. You can just play g takes f6 now. Alright, well, what should black do at this point? Probably he's losing regardless, but if he plays bishop to f5, he's losing quickly. So this is very natural. It looks like it's a great move. You're offering a trade of queens, you're threatening to take the rook, and you're up a piece to start with. But after queen h5, bishop h3, queen g5 is mating. g6, queen h6, game over. So black must play bishop to g6. Alright, queen c1, threatening to take on g7, then play queen h6 and queen h8 mate. So knight c6, and the point is, alright, if f takes g7, he simply gives up the rook there, and I think plays knight takes e5. That should be satisfactory. What do you think about that, though? fg, knight e5, queen h6. Yeah, knight to d3 won't work because of king f1. So what do we do here? I gotta figure this one out. All right. So f takes g7. Indeed. Queen d3 is no good because the rook just takes it. And so rook e8, queen h6. I guess you have to move the. Oh, no. For a second I thought I saw it. For a moment I thought I had it. Alright. So I'm trying to find some way to not lose everything, not lose the shirt off my back, but maybe black does have to give up his shirt. Okay. I feel like I must be missing something. Alright, let's see. Queen c7. Now, first of all, if we take, I mean, how bad can this be? Alright, rook takes, And the idea is queen h6, queen e5 check. And although white's pawn structure is not brilliant, I mean, he is still up the exchange. So this shouldn't be so bad for white. All right, queen h6 though would be terrible because queen e5 check and queen g7. So this, maybe this is forced, and maybe this is fine for white too. It's just that queen f4 is even better. All right, so queen f4, stopping that idea, or at least trying to. All right, so here, yeah, of course, if queen c7, knight f3. And I should check this too. So So fg7, queen c7. What if knight f3 at this point? Well, then knight takes e5. Okay, so that's the answer to that. Knight e5, queen h6, knight f3 check, g takes f3, queen e5 check, and he can take. But, wait a minute, after knight f3, there's king f1. So how about this one? So black is still in trouble here. Alright, so this is still kind of interesting and messy. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe f6. But again, I mean, now white just cashes out. So take, we make a queen, rook takes, queen h6, queen g7. And white is certainly very happy. He's up the exchange in a pawn. So maybe there's multiple wins here. All right, but going back, queen f4. Here, black could try knight to d4, again, hoping to buy his way out. But queen h4, knight c2, king e2, queen d3, takes, and then again, it's almost mate. And in fact, yeah, here it's going to be mate. So, or huge material gain. All right, so the point of all of this then is that h takes g5 is ultimately losing. All right, so Reshevsky found the only move here, bishop to e4. The position gets more and more complicated. All right, what does white do at this point? Well, we saw this idea already. Rook to h3. Bishop takes d3, but this time it's not e takes f6, but rook takes d3. Okay, queen c7. And now we have another very interesting moment. Okay, white should take on f6, so that part's not so tough. But which way should he take? What's the best move? All right, so dig in deeply. Probably, well, they might both win, but e takes f6 seems to be best. Well, what now? Black can choose between hg5, which is our main move, but also there's queen h2. So on queen h2, king f1, hg, rook h3. I think this favors white. And then here queen d6, and black's in lots and lots of trouble. The threat is to play queen f8 check and then rook h8 mate. And if knight a6, f takes g7 is winning, so probably rook e8 is best. And then queen e6. But it doesn't seem that black is going to hold here in the long run. So the knight's going to come to f6, and if he stops it that way, then queen d6, and it's mate's on the horizon. All right, so after e takes f6, h takes g5. Here's our main line, and now white's got good options here. So f takes g7 should be okay. Queen e5 check, then just king f1 should be winning pretty quickly. If king takes g7, queen h5, g takes h4, queen g5 check, king h7, rook h3 is game over. So it looks like Keres could have won pretty clearly and straightforwardly. So he missed this. All right, going back to here, another possibility is hg5, and this one's more complicated, but probably white is winning here too in all variations. So just to give the main line, queen e5 check. Here I think rook e3 is better than the move that was analyzed by Neidorf and Braunstein, but okay, it's all good. Queen g5, fg, rook e8. Okay, if rook c8, then rook g3, queen e5, knight f3, Knight here is going to go to h5, so queen g6, queen g4, intending to go to h4 and then mate, or h3. But now the problem is after king g7, knight e6 check wins the queen, and white is up too much, and the black king is terribly exposed. So white's winning pretty much across the board here. So, unfortunately for Keres, he played bishop f6, but he had analyzed a very, very long and deep and ingenious combination. So it continued g takes f6. Well, here, Keres' move was okay, but there are three moves that are worth considering. So again, give yourself a workout, try to find a forced win, or at least something very strong from this point. So I think there are three good moves here. There's e takes f6, which was recommended by Botvinnik. Queen e5 check, king f1, queen f6, queen g4 check, king h8, and now queen e4. And funny enough, this poor rook on a8 has no good way of being defended, because after knight a6, there's queen to b7. So the only try is queen f5, and that is good enough to avoid catastrophic material loss, but after this exchange and rook to d6, the rook ending is very bad for black. Well, not a pure rook ending, but anyway, it's bad for black. So Botvinnik's e takes f6 is a good move. The analysis there was by me, so I just knew that he recommended e takes f6. Okay, a second interesting idea is f4. I think this was proposed by Najdorf. All right. So this keeps the black queen from transferring over. See, the whole thing, I mean, black's defensive idea is that on e takes f6, as we saw, the queen can transfer over to the king side and keep the king secure. So f4 is an attempt to shut the queen out. All right, so for instance, if just f takes e5, then rook check, and it's mate. So if king h7, queen g4, threatening queen g7, and on f5 or f6, then you check, and then mate next move. And if king h8, well, in this case, there's no check on g6 after queen g4, f5, so you go to h5 first, king h7, and then you just go back to g4, same thing. So f takes e5 is hopeless. Well, what about f5, cutting off the queen from g4? Well, queen h5, king h7, and now knight h3, among other things, is winning. So the threat's knight to g5 check, king g7, rook to g3, and black is collapsing there. Just put a marker there. Another try, knight c6, rook to d7, queen d8, queen g4 check, and queen h5. And again, black is falling apart here in a hurry. So the last try is king h7, and now knight h3. All right, if rook to g8, queen h5, knight c6 takes, rook g6, castles, threatening rook to d7, and then rook f7. So rook to d8, and now white to move and win from here. So this is a nice variation devised by Najdorf, I believe. So this is a very attractive and clear-cut win. Rook takes d8. Now knight to g5 check. All right, if the king goes to h8, then rook takes d8, knight f7 is a fork winning the queen. So, and if rook takes, of course, just hg, and then queen h6 check and queen g7 mate. All right, so king g8, and now another chance to find it. Rook takes d8 check. Queen takes d8, and now queen g6 check, and f7. So very elegant. And okay, if king f8, it's a fork. If king g7, it's a fork. And on king h8, it's not a fork, but it's a double attack. There's no way for black to prevent promotion. So white is going to be a piece ahead, at least, and winning. Okay, so it looks like f4 is also a winning move here. And then finally there's Keres' move, queen to g4 check. Okay, king to h8. And again, white has lots of choices, but now I think the win is gone. Well, actually, it's not gone yet. I mean, white's still better, maybe winning, but it's not completely clear here. Okay, the first thing to note is that rook to g3 just fails immediately, because check, and then f5 and g7 is coming. Alright, if you try castling, again, queen takes d5 is okay. And white certainly has play here, but it looks like black can just hold on in this position. So I've analyzed this quite a bit more. You can take my word for it. Black should be able to hold. Or don't take my word for it. You might be able to overturn my results. So that would be fine too. But as far as I can tell, black can hold. Okay, so rook to g3 is just bad. Castling doesn't give anything, although it's okay. Another try is knight to f3. So again, trying to prevent the queen from coming over to the king side and developing a piece. Alright, from here, Kara's mentioned rook to g8 when queen h5 does indeed win, but knight to d7 is better. And I think black can hold. So rook takes d7, queen takes d7, and Najdorf gives ef, rook g8, queen h5, queen d3, and black has successfully defended himself here. That's correct. Rook to d1 is maybe a bit more interesting, but still the queen comes around and defends in this way. So white's got some pull here, but it looks like black is surviving this. So white's definitely got the upper hand in all of this, but I think black is going to draw. Okay, so a lot of complications there. The move chosen by Kara is queen to f3. So with a double attack, he's hitting the rook in the corner, hitting the pawn on f6. And the only move, of course, for Reshevsky is knight to d7. And now Kara's castled, which is okay, but rook to d6 is also very interesting. Again, trying his darndest to keep the black pieces away from the king side, to try to cut the board in half. Well, on this, black should play king to g7. And after queen to g3 check, king h8, f4, white has a clear advantage. So it's still, the position is still very difficult for black. Alright, Kara's played queenside castling. And this makes sense, right? So he's hitting the knight, and he wants to play queen f6. He wants to get this pawn. Well, Reshevsky very correctly played knight takes e5. It's a very good move. Queen f6 check, king h7, and now rook to d6. Okay, so the knight is threatened, and if knight to g6, I suspect that h5 is a good move. Also knight f3, that might be even better. Knight f3 with the idea of knight to g5. Well, I'm not positive that's better. It might be, but with ideas of using the h file for the attack. Also, after knight to g6, you can just play rook to d7. Rook to d7, then queen f4 check, and black can trade off to the ending. So h5 first, just send the knight to some poor square. Knight e7 is impossible because of rook to d7, so the knight would have to go to h8, and then white would be playing with an extra piece. Alright, so black played knight takes c4 for that reason. And now, white to move, what should he do? So here Karas did find the best try. Well, there are two moves that are about equally good. Generally they come to the same thing, or at least in one of the main lines they come to the same thing. A move that's very natural here, but not so good, is rook to d7. Here, I believe black escapes. Queen e5, again, the value of that square. Takes, king h8, rook to d7. Looks scary, but white's king is not exactly well protected either. King d1 is forced, knight b2 check, and black should either have perpetual, or depending on where the white king goes, the queens can be traded. So black is equal here. But white has two good moves, knight h3 and knight f3. Alright, so let's start with knight h3, which was not played. Queen takes d6. If knight takes d6, we'll see that'll transpose to the game after knight to g5 check. Okay, so queen takes d6, rook takes, knight takes, and materially black is doing great. He's got two rooks and a pawn for the queen, but his king is still less than ideally posted. So g4, g5, queen f3, hitting the rook, knight f4 is perhaps going to be played, and white has a clear advantage at this point. So this is pretty good. But knight f3 is very good too. Alright, so here queen takes d6 will work a little bit differently, of course, but still it's in white's favor. So takes, knight e5, rook a to d8, and now f3. And black is practically in Zugzwang here. If the knight moves, f7 drops. If I'm trying to think what else is going on. Well, the king can't move because it hangs the h-pawn. If the f-rook moves, then knight f7. And so that leaves the d8 rook. And I'm trying to remember what the problem with moving that guy is. Maybe knight to d7 in some variations. So, yeah, knight to d7 and then queen to e7. And, or at least, except for maybe rook to e8. But that becomes a problem too. So, black maybe not absolutely forced to play knight f5, but it's probably about as good a move as he's got. So knight f7, rook to d7, knight g5 check, takes, gh, queen f6, and then the question is whether black has achieved a permanent fortress here or not. And I think the answer is the or not part of that. It's not easy, but I think what white can do is to bring his king to the g file. So he can put his king here or here. And once the king's there, then the threat is to play queen to g6 check. And again, it looks to me likely that black is going to get put into a Zugzwang there. And I think he's going to run out of moves. So I don't think that he can hold this position. And if he moves the knight at some point, well, okay, and assuming the rook is guarded, he'll at least lose the h-pawn. If he moves the rook, then queen f7, or queen takes e6. And if he moves the king, you know, the king's going to run out of squares once the white queen's on a square like g6. So, and the queenside pawns, they'll run out of moves too. So I think white will probably win this, but I'm not 100% sure. Okay, so in the game, Reshevsky played knight takes d6. And here, knight to g5 check, as mentioned earlier. Black cannot take on g5 because after hg, there's no defense to rook h1, rook h8. So that'll happen by some move order or other. So king to g8, queen takes h6. And here the main line of Keres' combination when he played bishop takes f6 was this. So f5, knight e6, although rook takes d6 is even better, but knight e6, queen h7, takes, and white is up a pawn, but this should be a winning rook ending. So this is a pretty impressive combination to calculate from back. Go back to where it was. So from this position here, Keres had calculated all of that. So let's go through that again, just so you can see it all kind of run together. So all of this, knight f3, hanging the rook, here, f5, knight e6. So that's pretty impressive. Now, it won't be surprising for you to learn, though, that by this point, the players were down to literally seconds. I mean, this became a big bash fest from here till move 40. And this is despite the fact that these guys were playing with what was for many years the classical time control. 40 moves to make in 2.5 hours. So that may seem incredibly leisurely to you here. And yet, nevertheless, here they are on move 23 or so, and they're both practically out of time. Now, for Reshevsky, that was really common. He was renowned for being a time trouble addict, and for being able to play just fantastically well in time trouble, too. I mean, it was remarkable just how incredibly well he was able to play and how many points he saved and even won in this kind of harrowing pressure. Keres wasn't that way at all. I mean, you know, he's capable of getting in time trouble, but he wasn't some kind of addict like Reshevsky. But nevertheless, the position was just so complicated that, you know, they were able to burn between the two of them just about 5 hours, and it's only move 23 at this point. Okay, so Reshevsky played the much better f6. So f5 probably deserves a question mark. So f6, knight takes e6. The main difference being that, of course, on rook takes d6, black can take on g5. So knight e6, queen e7, and here Keres, again, down to seconds, should have played queen g6 check, but not for perpetual. So he could have gone for the perpetual. He didn't want it. He played for the win, but rook takes d6 was a mistake. So you could try to figure out, you know, how queen g6 works. Again, it's not with the idea of perpetual though. Alright, well here comes some more analysis. Queen to g6 check, king h8, queen to h5 check. Now, if queen h7, again we basically get to Keres' main line again. Queen h7, king h7, knight f8, rook d6, and white should win this ending. So, king to g8, and now rook to d3. Okay, and this is scary looking for black. Again, if queen h7, it's the same thing. We just take everything and wins. But there are two other moves that are both quite interesting. So one of them is knight to e4. And here, Bronstein mentions knight f8, rook f8, queen g4. But it looks like, yeah, he gives the variation to here, but now it looks like queen to e7 is good enough for equality. So the white king is too exposed. So the right move back here is queen to g4 check. And this appears to be winning. If the king goes over to h8, the big point is knight f8, rook to d7. And the queen can't be saved, as queen to g7 mate would be the upshot, would be the result of that. And on knight to g5, now hg, and the queen on g4 protects the knight, so there's no queen e6. And after f5, queen c4. So despite being an exchange down for a pawn, albeit, the threats keep coming in, and it's difficult for black to avoid losing the exchange. I mean, if he moves the rook from f8, there's at least knight to c7 check. So rook a to e8, rook e3, another very accurate move, not allowing black to get counterplay against the white king. Queen d7. Here maybe knight f8 is okay, but even better is g6. And on rook e6, yeah, well, the point is, okay, if rook f6, there's knight takes c5 check, and the pawn on g6 prevents black from playing queen f7. So he can't save the exchange. If king g7, then g4 is winning, and if b5, queen h4. So queen e6, queen h7 is mate, and here, again, white should win. So it's not resignable for black, but white ought to win this sooner or later. Okay, so that was knight e4. Another move, knight f5. Very clever idea. Takes away rook to g3 check. And if knight f8, then black can even win after queen to e1 check. So the right move is queen takes f5. Rook f7, rook g3, king h8, rook to g6, c4, threatening queen a3, check. Okay, avoiding it. And now, of course, if queen a3, queen g6 is mate next move. So queen d7, and here white takes. And on queen g7, then queen f6. And three connected pass pawns are at least one too many, probably two too many. So queen d3, takes, but still, after rook h5, white's up 2 pawns and should win the game. So Keres could have won with this play up through this point. It's only here that he throws away the win. So rook takes d6, and after rook to f7, the position seems to be about equal. Alright, white should have probably tried g4 here, or again here g4 gives white at least the more comfortable half of approximate equality. But he played f4, and now after f5, Reshevsky is better. So it's not immediately obvious, but the white kingside mass has been stymied. The attack is cooling off at the very least. So white still has a lot of space here. Materially, he's not too bad. He's down just the exchange for a pawn. But that knight on e6 is really stuck. I mean, if it moves, then queen e1, rook e2, and here comes everybody. So he's got to be careful. Okay, black could try queen h4 here, but king c2, and the king will kind of squirrel off to b3 if need be. And the position is still quite in the balance. So king h8 is a good move. Queen e5 check, queen f6, king c2, and here black could have probably traded, and then played f4, and like this, but the position is still pretty close to equal. So Reshevsky played c4, and here Keres should have played g3, and this probably would have maintained equality. But he plays king to d2, which is a mistake. It's exposing the king a bit. So king g8, queen d5, and now queen takes h4. And now all of a sudden, the position is getting very dangerous for Keres. If he tries rook to d8 to exchange, then queen e7, hitting the knight, and protecting the rook, of course. King c2, rook takes, knight takes, queen d7. And this fine move wins the game. So white has to cash out here, but this pawn ending is lost for white. And he's basically in Zugzwang. He plays g3, then a5. The king goes back, then king c5, and wins. White's kingside counterplay is too slow. And if a4, a6, a5, king c6, and again, white's lost. King e3, king d5, and king e5, b4, and black makes a queen. So back to here. Rook to d8 doesn't work, so Kara's played queen c4. Check here, and now it looks as if black can win a couple of different ways. So queen e1 check, I think, wins, with the follow-up idea of b5. So if queen b5, just rook takes e6, and on queen to d5, then queen e2, then queen c4, and whether white trades queens or not, I believe white's lost. So queen e5, rook f to e7, the knight's a goner, and if takes, the black rooks are active, and he should liquidate to an ending where he's probably going to be a full exchange up pretty quickly. Okay, so queen e1 check wins. King h8 may also win as well. Oh no, sorry, king h8 is not as good. So queen e1 is definitely the cream of the crop, but king h8 is also advantageous for black. So queen d4 takes, and here white should probably play c takes d4, although he's still in a bad position. But knight takes d4 is well met by rook to g8. The rooks get active, and white is going to lose. So queen to g1 check was chosen by Reshevsky, also not a bad move. King c2, queen g2, king b3. Here queen to e4 is certainly very good. Black is probably clearly better at this point, but you know, it's tough for him to kind of unravel everything. So b5 is, I think, a nicer move. Now, the pawn is immune because of rook to b7. If you go to d3, trying to keep everything under control, and maybe play rook to d8 in some cases, or have queen to g3 check if the black queen tries to go somewhere else, well, a5. Knight to g5, a4 check, king b4, queen b2, king a5, rook a7, king b6, queen f2, and black is clearly better. Okay, if rook to d4, then queen g2 is kind of a nasty little shocker there, since on king takes, I believe it's going to be a forced mate, but let's see, I'm not sure if I'll be able to calculate it on the spot for you. But it looks like you have to start with queen a8 check. So rook to d5 is probably forced, queen g1, and now on queen d4. Okay. Basically, sooner or later, this kind of ending is going to arise, and white's in a lot of trouble. So Kara's avoided that and played queen to d4. All right, queen f1. And this gives, well, this has a threat of queen to b1 mate, but it also gives the option of queen to c4 check. And unfortunately for Reshevsky, and if he had won this game, I mean, who knows what would have happened in the event? I mean, he would have really been in great shape. So instead, well, he played queen to c4 check, and this was a mistake. So after takes, king takes c4, rook c8 check, the players had finally made the time control. Here I think the best move would have been king to d5, and this is equal. But okay, Kara's played king to b5, and this is good enough for a draw. Probably, but white has to do some sweating. Anyway, the game was adjourned at this point, and the players did their sweating with their seconds, worked everything out, and couldn't come up with any concrete winning plan for black, so they agreed to a draw. But let's go back to this point. So here, it seems that rook to f6 is a winning move. So that stops the, well, there was no mate threat because the rook was carding it, but it keeps that diagonal closed. It threatens the knight, and the remarkable thing, okay, the nice trick is, of course, that if queen f6, then queen c4 check, and queen a4 is mate. All right, well, how about rook to d8? Bronstein, in his notes, thought that this was going to save the game, but it loses to queen to b1 check. So, remarkably, rook f takes e6 does not lose. Or sorry, does not win. The point being that after king f8, queen f5 check. So black can still push for a win with king h6. Notice that you can't take here because of this checkmate. And, okay, queen b5 loses, but after queen f7, black is better, but the fight goes on. But going back here, instead of rook f takes e6, first queen to b1 check, and now rook e8. And the point is just that the f5 pawn is protected, so that in this position there's no queen f5, and black will manage to elude the perpetual check. So just one variation to illustrate this. Okay, if queen d4, king h7, no more checks. And if queen g2, king f8, rook e8, no more checks, or at least no more good checks. So black is winning with rook to f6. Oh, and then finally, so we looked at queen f6, and we looked at rook to d8. Finally, knight to c5, rook takes, queen c4, queen a5, queen b2, and queen g7. And black is up a full exchange. His king is completely safe. There's nothing even close to perpetual on the horizon. So black should win this as well. So it was a big break for Keres. Of course, Reshevsky was extremely lucky not to lose earlier. So not too much that you can really rue about this, but he did have his chance towards the end. All right, so from here, it looks like it should be a draw. So if rook takes c3, check, and knight to g5, check, and white's obviously fine. So rook f6, c4, and thanks to knight c7, it looks to me like white can hold this. So, he's got a pawn for the exchange. His king is pretty well placed. Black's king is out of play. And so although the f4 pawn is a weakness, white can hold it. And again, it looks to me like white is all right. So black can push. Certainly, if this was a game without adjournments, black would have pushed. But, these guys had hours and hours and days for their seconds to work on it with them. And so I'm sure they worked it out to perfection that there was no way for black to win. All right, so a very exciting game, very complicated. If you guys stopped and tried to calculate everything out, I'm sure you guys have a splitting headache by now, but it's good exercise for you. It'll make you a stronger player. And it's just a very entertaining game as well. So whether you gave yourself a big workout or not, it was hopefully still a very exciting and enjoyable game. So I hope you guys liked it. Again, let me definitely recommend these books on the Zurich tournament, Neidorf's and Bronstein's. And who knows, maybe now that they've translated Neidorf's, they'll do Irva's as well, and maybe Stahlberg's too. Who knows? Get all four if they come out, or if you know Swedish and Dutch. Okay, so that will do it. I will see you next week. Take care and enjoy the rest of the World Championship. So as of right now, we have 2 games plus a potential playoff to go.